Good Tuesday, everybody. Alongside Brent Hubbs, Rob Lewis, and Lance Armstrong, I'm Austin Price for the. Go ahead. I can't even do it.
Good Tuesday morning, everybody, and welcome to the Volquest Podcast. I'm Eric Kane, alongside Austin Price, Brent Hubbs, and Rob Lewis. It is presented by Exterior Home Solutions. For a free estimate, give them a call today at 865-524-5888. A whole lot to discuss here on this edition of the Volquest Podcast. And if you are a member of Volquest.com in the General's Quarters, you got to see a ton of recruiting coverage on Saturday, on Sunday, Monday, today, throughout the rest of this week. A big-time weekend of recruiting for the 865 Live. We'll discuss a little bit of that. And then, of course, the SEC Spring Meetings down in Destin, Florida. That kicks off this week as well, so going to touch on that. But first, Austin Price, it was a big weekend for Tennessee, and from the looks of it, a couple of days out, it looks like Tennessee kind of moved the needle for some really important prospects.
Well, they really did, Eric. And when you look at what they were able to get done, across the board, I thought it was kind of a moving weekend. They moved, I think even with Alabama and Georgia for Amari Jefferson, which to me gives Tennessee the inside track going into official visits. I think they're someone that, they've made Amari feel like he's a real priority. I'm not sure that was necessarily the case, 5 months ago. I think that's definitely the case now. I think Tennessee's going hard there. Sammy Brown takes his official visit. His quote was, Tennessee set the bar high, for the rest of the official visits. I would still lean Georgia, but I think Tennessee's got a legitimate shot here to make some noise, if he's going to leave the state of Georgia. I think Clemson's kind of taken a little bit of a tumble, and I think Tennessee has really positioned themselves to be the main competition for the Bulldogs with the next month, full of official visits going down the stretch. Kingston Lopa, wide receiver, Sacramento, California. I think Tennessee did a really nice job there, over the weekend. This is a young man. He's 6'3", near 200 pounds. Long arms, has really good ball skills, could play safety, could play wide receiver at the next level. I would probably lean on wide receiver, but as a kid that, knows Dante Stallworth, he knows Ontario Smith. They all went to the same high school, and Ontario Smith, talks to the kids at that high school about, hey, don't waste your talent like I did. Like he talks to them, giving him his life examples. And that's great to hear, Hubbs. I mean, it's a guy that, Tennessee fans loved when they had him. And then, sadly he, was, gone from the team, but, a really, really neat kind of comeback story to hear he's, kind of talking to these high school kids. And then, you look across the board, Daniel Calhoun, Gage Ginther looks the part. I'll say that. I think the longer that one, Rob, you talk to him, the more you see it, you're like, Tennessee was really smart to get that one done early.
No, he's a load. He's 6'6". He's built like Eric Kane, but in a 6'6" frame.
Except for he's not wearing the Lance Armstrong,
Livestrong, baby,
jersey. Let's talk about the in-state kids for a second. Ronan O'Connell, Wisconsin, Tennessee, Clemson. Tennessee, I still think, has the inside track there, but he kind of plays things close to the vest. Boo Carter had a good time. Still expect him to come off the board sometime in June. Feel like Tennessee's still the team to beat there. Edwin Spillman, the same thing. Moved his brother Nathan in over the weekend. And then, of course, Jefferson, who, I'll continue to say is just as important as any recruit in his class, just when you look about who you're beating out for him. If you win that recruitment, you're beating out teams that you have to beat on the field. And I think that it all starts with beating them out and recruiting some. You're not going to beat them out all the time, but you're going to win some of those battles. And it's good to see. And then Tennessee's going to take their puncher shots at Dylan Stewart, flipping a Mello Jones from Georgia, and Aiden Breland, out of, 5-star defensive tackle out of Modern Day out in California. You swing, Hubbs. It's what you do. You've got to get the ones that are kind of common sense, to Tennessee type recruitment's done, but you definitely take your swings. And I think that's where you see Tennessee with a different caliber of player, a different caliber of recruiting weekend for the 865 Live.
Yeah, a couple of things that in what you're talking about there. First of all, Grant High School in Sacramento, California. Dante Stallworth came off the board first. Tennessee beats out Arizona State for him. And then Ontario Smith was a much bigger deal. But nobody knew who Dante was. That was a fine by former Vol quarterback Jerry Colquitt, who was working in the recruiting office at the time before he went on to the NFL ranks to work for the Seattle Seahawks. But that was a find by Jerry Colquitt. If my dates all add up, I don't think he found him once he went out to Seattle, but he got Tennessee started on Dante Stallworth. Dante Stallworth really likes Josh Heupel, Austin. He really likes what Tennessee's doing. He's been around the program.
He was at the Orange Bowl.
He was at the Orange Bowl. He likes what they do with receivers. And so those, people always talk about VFLs and, why relationships, and you want to work those relationships. And Josh Heupel's done a really good job with that. And that could potentially pay off in that recruitment, because Dante Stallworth feels like he's a big deal at Tennessee. He's been welcomed with open arms by this staff. And, you just never know with those things. And so you always work those relationships, because, who knows where a guy lands that has a tie to somewhere, somebody somewhere along the way. And this is a great example of that. Bigger picture is the volume and the quality, the combination of the volume of athlete and prospect who is here, combined with the quality of guys who are here. Everybody's wondered, when's Tennessee going to capitalize on the season? And look, I don't know how many they're going to close with, but they haven't had a day like this in a long time, what they had on Saturday in terms of numbers and quality of numbers that were in town for events like this. And that's not a knock on the previous coaching staffs, okay? I'm just saying, when you look at who was here, a lot of big-time prospects, which says a lot about the staff's recruitment, the relationships they're building, and I think it speaks to the volumes of Tennessee's success last year on the field.
100%. And you look back at the last couple of months, you look at Nate Frazier, Breland, Brandon Baker, Lopa now. Clearly Tennessee is making a push in California. Lopa's got Polynesian ties to him, right? So, like, he Tennessee's trying to get into the Polynesian, California kind of, express lane. And, when you think about it, Joey Halsey's got ties to California, but then you check off one person on staff who was a key part in all those California kids years ago, and that's Scott Altizer, understanding there's real quality out there. Let's go out there and take a swing. And there's enough of a track record of Ontario Smith and Kevin Simon and Kevin Burnett and Arian Foster and Casey Clausen and Dante Stallworth and Albert Toina. And you can go right down the list of those California kids, Joy and Battle, even some of them, come from the JUCO ranks in California. They all had success here. Even though it was 20 years ago, you can still point to it. And kids are paying attention to it. And the biggest thing I got over the weekend, Rob, and I'm sure you heard it too, was what? Family vibe. Genuine.
Comfort level, down to earth.
Yeah, it's not all about football here. And I mean, don't get me wrong, they still got to play the game. They still got to win games, right? But like, the parents and the kids, and not every kid wants that, right? Some kids want just straight football. They don't want to deal with any of that other stuff, But some kids really gravitate towards the opposite way, or a mixture of both. And this staff and Josh Heupel just come across as super genuine with kids and parents, and I think that's why Tennessee's swimming in deeper waters. Again, you're going to get bit by the shark occasionally and not get a kid, but for the most part, if they can lend their fair share of these top quality kids that they had coming in, then that's a huge step in the recruiting class for 2023.
Well, and AP, just back to the California comment. I mean, even a guy who didn't sign here originally, but has made it very clear how much he enjoys being in Knoxville, Brew McCoy.
There you go.
Brew talks about not just playing at Tennessee, but if you go watch Vol Club Confidential, all right, there's a shameless plug, I know, but if you go watch his episode, his comfort level in Knoxville and how he talks about it's a bigger place than I thought it was going to be, and there's some cool vibes downtown and some different things like that. Those types of things resonate with kids. And you do have to have a few guys who have ties out there that can sell it, whether it's Joey Halsley or a GA or an offensive analyst or a defensive analyst or a current player like Brew McCoy, in addition to those former players. So I don't think Tennessee's ever going to have a pipeline to the West Coast, but we're living in a world where, Rob, traveling around the country to play football is not the end of the world to do. And, oh, by the way, your two biggest schools in California are playing in the Big Ten, and they're not playing 9 games in the state of California or 10 games in the state of California anymore.
Yeah, and it's not just Tennessee, but don't you kind of think the dissolution of the Pac-12 is going to help a lot of people that want to recruit the West Coast? Again, not just Tennessee, but I think USC is not going to take everybody, and who knows what Oregon's brand name, how that's going to suffer over the next few years. And I think you're right, Albert. There is you're signing 5 or 6 kids every class, but Tennessee has a track record on the West Coast. There's some seeds have been planted over the years.
Well, when Tennessee's recruiting their best, and Austin, I think you would agree with this, when they're recruiting at their best, obviously you have to win to do this, but their footprint is kind of an amoeba, and it moves. Now, there's some standards, right? They need to get back into North Carolina. I think you should recruit Virginia. You're always going to recruit Georgia. But look at where Tennessee's at. They're working some ties to California right now. Look at what they're trying to do in the Midwest in Missouri and trying to do some things. When you look at Tennessee through the years, when Philip Fulmer had it rolling, it wasn't out of the question for them to go a little bit outside of the traditional footprint, if you will, to go get football players. And I think when Tennessee's at their best, they can do that because they are truly a national brand. And I think they're moving back into that direction, which is why a lot of people are excited and should be excited about where things are right now.
Yeah, 100%. I love how you used amoeba, but it's so true. Like, you have to kind of move around. Like, you can't just go say, hey, we're going to recruit Mississippi every year. Some years you don't want to recruit Mississippi. Some years you do. Some years you don't want to recruit Virginia. Some years you do. Occasionally you go dip into Kentucky. Occasionally not. So, 100%, you've got to kind of find the weak spot across the board, and that's what they've done a nice job of. And, again, you got to kind of let the chips fall wherever they may. Like, everybody panicked over Jaden Riddell. Again, if they miss on all these guys, then there's room for panic. But who knows? They may end up landing a few of these really high-end players.
Kind of on that note, obviously that was the big talk this week. Tennessee's one of Tennessee's top targets overall. Obviously the top of his position and tight end committed to Georgia. And you got Amir Jackson on campus. I went back and watched the video you guys did with him. He just kind of said, hey, essentially I didn't know what to expect. I got here. I really, really like it. Seems like Tennessee going to be really interested in now Amir Jackson, of course, the tight end position. Seemed like he had a good day on Saturday.
Yeah, he did. And Tennessee's going to, likely get in the kid out of Utah, Roger, and I'm not going to pronounce his name because I don't want to butcher it. Probably the second week of June unofficially. Both those kids look like they're going to go into the fall and not make a decision until, we're talking November, December type range. So, it'll be interesting to kind of see how all that plays out. But, getting Amir here was big. And I asked him point blank, I said, all these people just kind of have you pegged for Florida because you were Florida and Georgia at the top. Now Georgia's taking 2 tight ends. You're not one of them. I said, what are you saying? He goes, well, you can believe that if you want to. He clearly is going to, take his time and probably the right thing to do. He's a basketball kid that's, morphed into a football prospect and is getting more and more interest by the day.
Well, and that's what that position is all about now, right? Is it's become basketball players because a lot of those kids in high school, Rob, are seeing the game of basketball where you're a positionless player in the pro ranks. And so, hey, go try football and football has a little success. There's a better path for you long-term athletically in some cases as a tight end, whether you're Ethan Davis or whether it's Amir Jefferson, because you're not going to go translate your power forward back to the basket game that you're playing in high school and turn that into a pro career. That's just not where the game's at right now.
No, and historically, that's probably, always been the position that cross training, for lack of a better term. But I remember back, golly, what's it been, Hubbard, 15 years ago when Bruce Pearl, I remember, called Coach Fulmer. It was like, hey, we've got a kid, over here in team camp that you guys need to take a look at. It was Luke Stocker. How that all started. You go back to Antonio Gates and a long list. But I think the way the NFL game is changing is making that more prevalent. Like those, those guys. You don't see any 6'6", 250-pound maulers anymore. Darnell Washington being an exception, but lots more flexing out, playing in space, and yeah, you're right. Amir Jackson. You see him, you think he got lost from basketball camp. but he looks the part.
So Tennessee moved the needle a little bit for four-star running back Daniel Hill on Saturday. That story's up at Volquest.com. But Austin, Tennessee did finish. Tennessee did cap off the recruitment of Peyton Lewis, picking up that commitment on Saturday before the end of the 865 Live. And it's a highly rated four-star running back. Tennessee wanted, Tennessee got.
Yeah, the more I'm around Peyton Lewis, the more I'm impressed by him. Very smart. He's a bigger kid than you think he is. I mean, he's a legit 6'1", and he's about a little over 200 pounds. Verified 10.5, 100 meters, and again, I just think he's super polished and handles himself a certain way. And then Daniel Hill, I mean, Tennessee again did what they were supposed to do. They showed him enough to make him think about Tennessee. Now, does that mean that he's back for an official visit? I think he likely takes an official visit in the month of June. Does that mean that they can catch South Carolina and Alabama, the other two schools that I think are in the top three for him, as he said after the 865 Live event? I don't know. We'll see. I think he needs another strong official visit to put Tennessee in that conversation. He's been to South Carolina a ton. Alabama's not too far from where he lives. And he's a bigger back. He weighs 234 pounds. He doesn't look 234, but he weighs 234. Kind of like Braylon Russell. Doesn't look 240 or 250, but weighs that and can move like a 215 or 220 pounder, just like Russell can. So Hill's a special player. Russell's a special player. And Tennessee, I think, will continue to recruit them and Nate Frazier out in California at Mater Dei and one or two more, and we'll see who they can pair with Peyton Lewis. Peyton Lewis, though, very, very, very talkative about wanting to add a second back to this class and helping Tennessee do so in recruiting that second back.
Yeah, Daniel Hill said that he was whenever you guys talked to him on the video, said that he hadn't had a chance to talk to him that day, but said he's going to text him and ask him why he committed to Tennessee. And so, he's going to be doing his part to recruit another back there with Daniel Hill as well. Before we shift gears over to the SEC spring meetings, anything else that stands out? Of course, we got videos, we got stories, tons up on the site, tons more coming up this week. But anything else that stood out from the 865 Live event over the weekend?
No, I just think Tennessee continued to set the stage for their official visits in the month of June. Building on that with Amari Jefferson, building on that with potentially Daniel Hill, building on that with a Daniel Calhoun or
Cam Michael,
and so forth. Cam Michael, who
that's what I thought he was a Georgia lock. I mean, I don't follow it as much as you guys do, but I didn't get that impression after talking to him.
Well, the thing about Michael, and this is kind of where I'm like, he set his official visit date of November 18th.
When they play Georgia.
And if I'm Tennessee, I don't want him to take a visit that day. Like, if your main competition is Georgia, why would you want him to take the official visit for that game? Like, I wouldn't if I was Tennessee. And I wouldn't if this was a Tennessee kid and going to visit Georgia for the Tennessee game, I wouldn't want it if I was Georgia.
So big weekend over on campus for the 865 Live. It's now one of the biggest days on the calendar for Tennessee football. It was a big weekend last year. It was a big weekend this year.
Just as big as your birthday, Kane.
So what?
Just as big as your birthday.
Just as big, and we'll see if more commitments.
It is crazy how these events have just kind of evolved and become, such an important piece to what you do. I mean, it's kind of strange because there's so many junior days and there's so many things, but I guess because these events are so unique, AP, that it's become, unique in the fact that it's so not about football, and it is kind of a family and prospect hangout deal. It's kind of crazy that they've become sort of what they have around the country.
100%. And I think every kid, when they get here, they're like, what is this kind of hokey BJ's Ballers and all that stuff? They have all these team names, and then they start doing the scavenger hunt, and then the competitive streak kicks in, right? Like nobody wants to lose, like the look in Cam Fountain's face when he said, man, we finished 7th. It was like so disappointed that Rodney's team finished 7th. But I think that's where it kind of, turns into like a competition, and then all of a sudden some camaraderie, and you may think it's hokey that they're going to play putt-putt, or they're, going on a scavenger hunt or doing a talent show. But then when you start inserting creativity and competitiveness and all that, it ends up being a melting pot for kind of a fun event. And, kids like it.
So plenty more coverage of that 865 Live, talking with recruits on campus once they got home. All that coverage you can find over at Volquest.com. We're going to preview the SEC spring meetings, the big things to come this week here in a moment as the Volquest Podcast continues. But first, a proud sponsor from our friends over at Exterior Home Solutions.
You know, life happens, and damage to your home can be extremely stressful. That's why it's important to find someone who offers efficient, quality work with financing options. Exterior Home Solutions, they value not only family, but community, and they're who I call when life happens, and you should too.
SEC spring meetings down in Destin, Florida. It feels like we've been circling the state for a long time. We know that Oklahoma, we know that Texas is coming to the SEC for the start of the 24 season. And when that happens, scheduling has to change. Brent Hubbs, are we going to finally get a resolution on the football scheduling by the time those meetings wrap up in Destin this week?
You know, I don't know that you are. I mean, I thought it was a lock that they would. Maybe they do. I think those are that room, that discussion at the coaching level, the AD level, chancellor president level is going to be a really fascinating discussion all week long, because the general consensus is out there has been it's a lock to be a 9-game schedule. That's been the consensus for a year, basically coming out of last year's spring meetings. That was the direction they're going. We know there were 2 or 3 teams a year ago, Austin, that were like, "Yeah, we want an 8-game schedule." But you're like, okay, you can want, but there's too many other people who are on board with a 9-game schedule. It doesn't seem like it's nearly swung that way. It's I don't want to call it 50-50, but it is much more an 8-game schedule is much more of a viable option than I ever dreamed it would be as they get ready to discuss it in Destin, Florida.
Well, what you've seen, I think, is, you know, as you pointed out, there was about 3 schools. I think it was Ole Miss, South Carolina, and Tennessee. I know for sure it was South Carolina and Tennessee. I don't remember. Maybe it was somebody else besides Ole Miss. Either way, like, there was only like 3. I think what you've seen is this morph because a bunch of schools aren't happy with their three permanent opponents. And so, like, it's not fair. It's not Alabama. I mean, Nick says it's not fair. He's got to play LSU and Tennessee. All of a sudden, Tennessee's not a pushover anymore, and he's got to play Auburn. It's just not fair. Well, I mean, that's fine. Then it becomes easier on Tennessee. If Tennessee gets Vanderbilt, which I'm 97% positive they will, that's a huge win for Tennessee, because that means you only go to Tuscaloosa once every 4 years. You only go to Athens, Georgia once every 4 years instead of every other year, and having them on the schedule every year. That's a huge win for Josh Heupel and the Vols, which is why the Vols voted for 8 games a year ago. So if this thing comes back around because some people all of a sudden didn't like their permanent 3 opponents, it's a big win for Tennessee. It was going to be a win for Tennessee regardless, because they weren't going to have Georgia and Alabama on their schedule every year, the top 2 teams in the league for the last decade. But now it becomes a real win if they go to 8 games. And I think because of some of the shift, if you're going off the logic and the notion out there that Nick's pushing all this, I think it could get done this week.
Well, we'll see. I mean, I think the interesting thing is you got a group of coaches who are looking at it solely from a competition standpoint. I think that's their level of looking at this thing, whether they like their 3, they don't like their 3, whether they like 9, whether they like 8, whatever. That's where they're at. Okay, well, everybody else was saying 9. I think people above them, AD, President Seville, were all saying 9. Now you're getting wind that the ADs and maybe some of the presidents are like, wait a minute, if we're going to play 9, the TV deal needs to be different. You need more money that way. So now you've got 2 layers of people that are questioning playing a 9-game conference schedule, which makes this a lot different than where it was a year ago when it was just a few coaches saying, wait a minute, we really not sure we want to play 9 games. Now you're bringing in another layer of people in there because you're bringing the finances into it.
Yeah, and I wonder where ESPN is with all that. If they're just like, hey, you know, you signed the contract, you know, whether you're playing 8 SEC games or 9. I mean, that's an aspect of it I'd like, you know, we probably will never find out, but I am sure that ESPN has an opinion. But I'm with AP. I mean, it could turn out to be a win for Tennessee, but I just never thought 8 was a realistic option. I mean, it just seemed like 9 seemed, especially with Texas and Oklahoma coming in. I thought 9 was a no-brainer. It's surprising to me that it apparently is not.
I mean, it just feels like it's a no-brainer because you're expanding the college football playoff and you have 16 teams. And
I mean, I could have seen that being a real, point against, if you keep it at 4. But the way where it's going now, I just, I wouldn't think that's a factor.
Well, it just means more, right? I mean, it just all of assumed that it was going to be a 9-game season. So I don't know. We'll see.
It's either going to be 9-1 or 8-1. I think 9-0 is the last option here. Don't you, Hubs? I just think.
Well, explain
the Power 5 game.
No non-conference Power 5 game.
Yeah, I think 9-0 locked in Power 5s is last out of this deal. I think it's going to be 8 conference games and 1 Power 5 guarantee, or 9 conference games and 1 Power 5 guarantee. Now, as you and I have discussed, Hubs, and several people have told us, the real bugaboo here is the 9-1. That means 9 conference games plus 1 locked in Power 5 probably gets you more money to the table, because the SEC or the ESPN's been used to paying basically for 9 anyways. They've paid for 8 conference games plus Florida playing Florida State, plus Clemson playing South Carolina, plus Tennessee playing let's say this year Virginia, or Alabama playing Michigan or whoever. Like the 9-0 just doesn't get ESPN and the ESPN contract any kind of extra goodies, right? Like there's just, it's just different.
Yeah, and here's the interesting thing, back to the TV conversation, Rob, and I have no idea. This is total speculation. Eric, you can jump in here too. If you're a TV executive and you're sitting here looking at it, are you more interested in 9 games in the conference? Are you more interested in 8 games with that you've got to play a Power 5 opponent? Because every other year, or at least when that's a home game at the SEC school, then that's going to be your right. That's going to be your broadcast right. So if say you're Alabama playing a Big Ten school, you're going to get that Big Ten school on your network. How much does TV executives look at that and like that more than the idea of you just play 9 SEC opponents and you don't play those games outside of your conference against the big Power 5 teams?
Well, I mean, I think, Hubbard, if it's Alabama versus Ohio State, that's one thing. But I mean, as well as I do, most of it is going to be Mississippi versus Samford.
Well, not if it's a Power 5.
Well, if they make them guarantee, not Samford, but it could still be Northwestern or somebody. I just don't think everybody in the league is going to go out and schedule aggressively. Whereas if I'm ESPN, I would feel better about just locking in 9 SEC games.
Well, and how much does this thing get blown up in the next 2 or 3 years if all those ACC schools disband and they, join the SEC and Big Ten too, right? I mean, this whole 8-1, 9-0, like this could be so short-lived, like long term.
Yeah,
don't you think?
I mean, it's revolutionary right now. You're right, AP. We could be sitting here in 2 or 3 years talking about how quaint that was to think about a little 16-team conference.
I do think no matter what, though, there is going to be the +1 there, because it's such an easy way to get that other Power 5 in there and preserve, your Georgia Tech, your Kentucky Louisville's, your Clemson, South Carolina, your Florida State, and so on and so on. There's so many of those, more than you realize across the SEC. It's an easy way to keep those rivalries, those in-state rivalries, keep a Power 5, and plus, the revenue that comes into it. Here's a question I have, and I'm sure none of us know the answer. If they don't come to a resolution this week, I mean, when will they? I mean, it still feels like it's forever away, but, September, it's going to be a year, and then they're here playing football. Like, when do they have to have this done?
Well, I think they have to get something done by the end of summer. I mean, I just think they have to get moving because of the timing that you're talking about. Here's where Greg Sankey's and he's going to come back, and I'll give Greg Sankey a ton of credit because this is his out for a lot of these things. Look, I oversee the league, but the league makes the decision. Whatever y'all voted for is what we're going to execute. In other words, I'm not telling you what to do schedule-wise. That's not my job. You guys are voting for this as a league. He's used that a million different times, right, through the years talking about things. But he's also got this on his kind of – he's talked about this. And there's 2 things. One, the idea of a kid going to school, and in 4 years, if he stays for 4 years, he plays at every venue in the league. Okay, so he doesn't leave and say, hey, I never got to play in Austin, Texas.
Yep.
Or, hey, I never got to play in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. And look, for years with the divisions, there were a lot of kids that they didn't play in those venues. Not Austin because Texas wasn't in there, but maybe in their 4-year span, they didn't go to Fayetteville, Arkansas, or they didn't go to Baton Rouge, or whatever the case may be. So he's talked about wanting to do that, which I think is a pretty cool notion. He's also talked about the importance of preserving rivalries, which you can't do if you stay at an 8-game conference schedule. You can't do both of those things. You can't preserve enough of your rivalries and get the kids at every venue in their 4-year period if you're at 8 conference games. It's just not going to happen. I mean, Georgia-Auburn is a great game that in an 8 conference game schedule with no divisional play and no only one locked in rivalry, that game's not going to happen because Auburn and Alabama they're not going to eliminate the Iron Bowl, but some other rivalries are going to, like the Egg Bowl will get preserved. The Iron Bowl will get preserved. But outside of that, not everything's going to get preserved. And so the question is, where do you balance those traditional games versus just letting them go and only playing them, once every couple of years or once, I guess it would be once every couple of years as opposed to playing them every year. I think that's an easier thing to get past than it is the idea that kids don't play at every stadium in their 4-year career, which is why I think the 8-game is a possibility where you go seven and one common opponent every year, because you still get every kid to play in all those venues, and you're playing that rivalry game every other year instead of every year, right?
Is Sankey the tiebreaker? If it goes 8-8, if the vote is 8-8, right? Because obviously Oklahoma and Texas are voting on this as well. Would Greg Sankey be the tiebreaker?
I don't know. I mean, that's good. I guess in theory that he would be. Would make sense that he would be, because I bet he would. I bet he'd move heaven and earth to try and avoid that.
Yeah,
I mean, back room negotiation with different presidents.
I don't think you're walking in the room without knowing what the vote's going to be.
I think you're right, AP.
Yeah, and here's the thing too. I mean, it's not just football. I mean, basketball's set, right, Rob? I mean, they're pretty much. I don't think they're going to change basketball a whole lot, right?
Well, I mean, there's going to be an adjustment with Texas and Oklahoma. I think the adjustment is going to be. I mean, they're going to have to play more games, and you're seeing this in the ACC and Big Ten right now. It's going to become really, really hard to schedule really good non-conference games when you're playing. I mean, I don't want to get off topic, but I mean, I talked to Coach Barnes about it.
But it's part of this topic. I mean,
yeah, but
because are they going to go? What, they play 18 games now?
Yeah.
What's the league? Are they going to go to 20? Are they going to go to 20?
It's going to move up when Texas and Oklahoma come in. I mean, that's not been written in stone yet, but it's almost going to have to.
But are they going to keep the two natural rivals?
That's not been decided yet. But I mean, unless I'm badly mistaken, I think that's going to be something that is talked about this week, but not nearly, as important as the football stuff.
No, I mean, it's not, but it is. I mean, I think you're going to see conference basketball games played pre-Christmas.
Well, like you're seeing now, ACC,
I think it's
Big Ten.
I think it's going to get scooted up even further, which goes to your point, Rob, about playing those big non-conference games. You're going to play non-conference tournaments like Maui and Bahamas and New York and all those things, and then the rest of your non-conference is going to be
that stuff's going to dry
scrimmage games,
and it's drying up now. I mean, I've talked with Rick about it. I mean, it's just trying to schedule North Carolina when they're playing 20 ACC games. I mean, they're not interested in that. Michigan State, just. A lot of those people are going to be that way.
Which, again, goes to the point that you were talking about, Austin, that if you go 9 conference games, how hard is it? And you say we're going to keep the one Power 5 in there, how realistic is it going to be that teams are going to schedule a home and home with, Oregon, or a home and home with Michigan, or a home and home with Ohio State, versus, hey, we'll do a Power 5 team who's traditionally not really good, and then we'll do our 3 deals. that's part of this equation in scheduling, and I think gets discussed on the football side of things, right?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, like, if you're, anybody in the league, does it behoove you to schedule another high-end team? Or do you schedule a Boston College or a Purdue or a Wake Forest or something like that? Somebody that, is quality, but not like super quality, as far as, you could lose, but more than likely you have a good chance to go win those type of games. And, I'm fascinated to kind of see how all this plays out. The other question I want to ask this week is, with Texas and Oklahoma coming into the league, how will they do that a year from now? Because technically they don't become part of the league until July 1. Well, guess what? I've talked about this with Heupel, so he knows where I'm going. Right now, you have to declare before February 1st to transfer within the league. Well, in theory, next year, there's kind of like that dead man's land for, like, a kid from Oklahoma could go to Alabama, or a kid from LSU could go to Texas, because they're technically not in the league. So does that rule change for next year? Because I don't think it would happen a ton, but I think there's obviously options there for it to change. Let's say, like, one of those Texas quarterbacks, they've got 3. After next year, they decide they want to leave after spring. Like, they could, in theory, go and be the quarterback at Auburn or Mississippi State or whatever under the current rules.
I mean, that rule's got to change. That's got to change, right?
I think that, I mean, you're talking about screaming a lot of foul, that whether it's a guy, whether you're, I mean, just, I don't know if it's on the, how many people have it in their crosshairs right now.
Yeah, I don't think anybody's thinking about it.
But that's over the course of the next 6-8 months, that rule's got to get changed for protection of the league. I mean, I think that you have to.
Tampering's such a big deal, right? And I mean, like, if you're Texas and you could go and cherry pick 2 or 3 really good players in the league before you technically get into the league, that would be interesting.
Yeah, it absolutely would. Same on the vice versa. If you're Alabama and you want to go get, somebody from Oklahoma and somebody, or Tennessee, and you want to go get somebody from Oklahoma and Texas and pull them from, that's. Yeah, I think that when somebody's got to say, hey, wait a minute, they've got to fall under those rules. I think their football calendar, whether they're an official member of the league or not, their football calendar has to start when bowl games are, or January 1 of the year that they're coming into the league. I think they have to fall into that.
Let's go around the room real quick as we are set to say goodbye. Prediction time. Austin, do they get it done this week, and what is the final resolution?
Yes, 8-1.
Brent?
I tend to lean towards 8-1. I'm not sure it gets formally announced this week, though. I'm not convinced of that.
I thought it was a done deal, but because Hubbard's been so skeptical this week, I don't think it gets done this week. I think they kicked the can down the road, to steal a phrase from AP.
I will stay consistent and say it gets done this week, and it'll be the 9-1, just to be different. But
yeah, I mean, I don't think that's I think if you're college football, you don't want to lose out on Michigan, Texas, and Tennessee, Nebraska, and I'm all for the conference games, and I get the SEC's adding a couple more, but I love home and homes, and I'll continue to beat the drum of Danny needs to quit scheduling. Some of it's been out of his control, like Virginia was out of his control. There was another one that was out of his control. They got to get back to home and homes. These fans don't want to go to Charlotte to play West Virginia, and they sure don't think about Atlanta when they play Syracuse.
Yeah, here's the interesting question, and I know where Tennessee fans are with Alabama. The older guys want to play Alabama, and everybody goes, "Hey, see why you play Alabama? Look what happened in this past October." There's some people who say, you know what, it's unfair. Let's lighten the load and not play Alabama every year because it's been unfair to Tennessee. I get all that, but I think there's enough people that say I want to keep playing Alabama. There's a lot of Auburn people and Georgia people who say we want to keep playing that game. I think if you poll a lot of SEC fans, they would rather keep their in-conference rivalry intact and less about playing a home and home with somebody else. I know it's cool to go to other venues, but I think there's a lot of people who would really like to keep their traditional games intact if they can. They don't have a vote in this, but I like going to unique places, but I think a lot of fans like the tradition of playing their rival that's been their rival for 100 years versus not playing that game every year. But the fans at the end of the day aren't getting a say in this vote,
which is why both sides can win if you go to 9-1.
That's you're absolutely right. But
again,
the problem, you got some people. If you go to 9-1, what's that one going to be? Is that one going to be games that you really want to go see and travel to? Okay. And remember this too. If you're a playoff team, a consistent playoff team, a lot of fans are saving their money for playoff travel, right?
Which just got another week.
Right. Now some of those will be, you could be a host school, okay, but somebody's traveling, and potentially somebody could travel 3 weeks in December, for playoff stuff moving forward. So there's a lot of different elements and a lot of different factors there. TV doesn't have a vote, but the vote will have some TV thought in mind. What's good for the game beyond just putting some fannies in the seats. And all these variables, there's so many of them. I'm not sure they work to a resolution between today and Friday, payday, hand out big checks. We're great. It just means more. We're rich day that Friday has traditionally been at the spring meetings.
Look, guys, look, it's the Arc de Triomphe. We finally made it to the end in Paris in the Tour de France.
Poor old Eric will never wear. He'll never wear the yellow shirt again. Okay,
not sure.
I'm just glad we can't see the spandex shorts, guys.
They're on.
that's count your blessings.
Here's the other thing I know too. If somebody were playing a drinking game based on 100%, they would be smashed at the end of this podcast today.
100%.
Right, AP?
Last thing out the door, Brent. Anything new with the investigation, with the hearing with the NCAA? You're getting a couple weeks into it, going towards the month of June. Anything new to update there?
No, I think we're moving into the window, to borrow my favorite Apollo 13 line there. It's getting bigger in the window. It's coming. And it was always going to be sometime in June. And I think that I don't think they're going to announce it while they're at spring meetings, but I think it can come, as early as the week after, and by mid-June at the latest. I think something will happen there. No new intel. I think Tennessee still feels like that they did the best they could do in Cincinnati, and we'll see kind of where it goes from there. But overall, I don't think there's any vibe from Tennessee that's taken a dramatic turn for the better or worse. I think they're kind of in the same thought process as where they were when they left that meeting room on the second floor of the Westin in Cincinnati.
He is Brent Hubbs. All surprise Rob Lewis. I'm Eric Kane. Appreciate all of you guys for tuning in and listening to us and watching us here on the Volquest YouTube channel. It's the Volquest podcast presented by Exterior Home Solutions. If you need any type of home upgrade, home solution, siding, roofing, decking, whatever the case may be, you can give them a call for a free quote today at 865-524-5888. A free estimate, 865-524-5888. That is Exterior Home Solutions. Appreciate you guys for tuning in. Don't forget to tune back in on Thursday for the Volquest Mailbag Podcast. I hope everybody had a happy Memorial Day and enjoy the rest of your Tuesday, everybody.
Salud.